All right.
Sean is not on the
Yeah,
video.
Sean's on. Looks like we got a whole lot. I got David Kressler again,
Hi,
Chris
Israel.
Helland.
Hi, good afternoon. So,
Yeah, we got a lot of guys that haven't been here for a while, so it's good to see you all. Hey, for everybody that's on, welcome back. This is Leaders Fusion for April. This is the fourth one of 2021. And so it's good to see you guys again. Today it's going to be Israel Stol talking about creativity, a really interesting take, and we'll have a few links and some other resources we'll post afterwards if you're interested in looking into it further. But Sean, do we need to hit anything else, or is that it?
Man, that sounds
all right.
Sounds like you
let's
got
do
it.
So we'll hand it over to Israel. Thanks for your time, and looking forward to this presentation.
thank you. And by the way, Sean, did you have a good vacation? You told me when we met that you were going to take off for a week or two. So I hope you had a good vacation.
Israel, you must have misunderstood me. I never get to have vacation. I had to go to work, but at least it was in a vineyard in California.
Oh, okay. So I misunderstood.
Yeah. You heard vineyard in California and you assumed vacation.
Sounds like vacation to me.
I apologize. I think, Sean, you have to improve your English accent so it's more understandable. Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or gentlemen. I will talk about creativity and its practice. And I would start stating that basically creativity involves all endeavors in life, industry, exploration, science, business, art, everything is imbued with creativity. And there are a couple of questions I would like to ask you. What is creativity? I would like one of you, if you don't mind, take a step of defining what it is. Then what is innovation? And what's the difference between creativity and innovation? Greg, do you want to take a stab at that?
I can't answer. I know the answers. I'm his neighbor.
Yeah, and I can't answer either because I spent a whole day with him just a couple weeks ago.
Okay, Terry, do you want to take a stab at it?
I'll take a stab in the dark. I'm going to take it that creativity is more of less the invention of an idea, where innovation is improving upon an idea.
Okay, thank you. And what's the difference between the two of them?
The difference between the two, let's see.
That's okay. That's okay.
Blazing new ground versus process improvement. One simple way to put it, maybe.
That's good. That's good. Thank you. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of patterns shortly, I hope. Creativity is the process of synthesizing distinctly new concepts towards goals with value to somebody and or something. Very close to what you have said, Terry. Innovation is the deliberate application and use of creativity towards achievement of goals with value to something or something. Creativity can exist without innovation, but innovation cannot exist without creativity. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So are you saying creativity is just not actually acting on it? Is that the difference then?
That is correct. Creativity is conceptualizing new ideas, inventions, and innovation is the process of implementing it. Very close to what Terry has just said. Yeah?
So creativity is the 30-something domain names I own for ideas I never actually built. And then
Dave, there are 3 other people on this call right now, at least, that are right there with you.
He didn't say give examples.
No comment.
Okay, good. So some exceptionally creative companies, all of you know them: Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Uber, SpaceX, Tesla, Motors, and so on. I had the opportunity and pleasure to be a consultant for 1 year in SpaceX, so I had a soft spot for them. But they are one of the most creative companies that I know about. Other examples of creative individuals, Charles Hall, he developed with his sister the smelting process, aluminum smelting process, which launched the aluminum industry and which also enabled to bring about aerospace industry. The Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville, they started basically the aerospace company, the aerospace industry. Tesla developed a multi-phase generator which electrified the world. And Goodyear, who discovered the vulcanization process by tinkering in his garage, enabled us to have tires and the rubber industry, which is enormous. I don't have to elaborate on that. Some famous creative individuals, personalities, Napoleon, Da Vinci, Curie, Thomas Edison, and so on. I would like to ask you, what is the number of letters in the English alphabet? Greg, do you hear me, Greg?
Oh, 26.
Okay, 96, good. What is the basic number of numbers used for counting and computations? Hi, Dave. Dave, do you have an answer for that?
Well, I'd just say 10 for counting and 2 for computations.
Okay. 10, basic number of numbers. Thank you. How many musical notes are in Western music? Terry?
No clue.
I say 12 on that one.
Well, thank you. Very good. Okay. The amazing infinities. Infinite number of words, sentences, and written text stemming from an infinite number of combinations of the basic 26 letters. Think about it. It's pretty awesome. Infinite number of numbers and computations made possible through the use of only 10 numbers. Infinite number of musical note combinations and compositions attained through the use of 12 basic musical notes. The amazing infinities are some of man's inventions. They enable to communicate and share his thoughts, man's thoughts, feelings, opinions, biases, and imagination over time and geography. Describe, model, and understand, record, communicate, and share natural phenomena, existing accessible information, new ideas. Project from the past to from past to present and into the future. 3 human inventions. We wouldn't be today benefiting from science and have wonderful jobs if it wasn't for these 3 basic inventions. So what is creativity and how does it work? I would like to ask you to use your imagination for a moment and imagine that you are in a universe of accessible information, different bits of information that are accessible to you. It can be your childhood, it can be your observations, it can be what you have learned, it can be what you have observed in nature, and on and on and on. All of us have access to some kind of information. Let's see what happens. When different pieces of accessible information are brought together in a certain combination, you get a novel concept. It's an invention, and it is a singularity in space and time. It was never done before. Okay? There are two types of imitation. One is direct imitation, acted out by duplication with little or no alteration. So if I see somebody taking this pen and moving it from this point to this point, I just imitate somebody. If somebody is trying to be more clever and comes up with some kind of device using a drone, taking the pen and moving it over here, that's different. That's a creative imitation. It's acted out with a newly inspired original twist. The definition of the process of creativity is very simple. Please write it down. Creativity is recombinant imitation with a new twist. Simple as that. So whenever somebody invents something, comes up with a new concept, all he or she does, it takes these different seemingly related or unrelated pieces of information in that universe of accessible information, combines these pieces into a new configuration, and that is an invention. Basic nature of creativity. The chain of creativity proceeds by imitators imitating imitators and or nature.
So Israel, real quick. So it sounds like, so on the
Yes.
creativity part of it, right? So you're talking about the creative, you're not actually generating anything new. You're just recombining it in a new way.
Correct. Correct. When you generate something new is when somebody takes an invention, which is a recombination of something, which is novel, and innovates. In other words, implements it. That's when you create something really new. Okay? So the chain of creativity is very, very ancient. You know, we have had people from 7,000 years ago in China, in Egypt. They came up with all kinds of inventions, and people imitated them, improved upon those inventions, and improved upon inventions, imitated them, and on and on and on. And that's what we do to this very day when we invent new concepts. All we do, we imitate imitators. Does that make sense, Terry? Okay. It is based on inter and intergenerational collaboration, teamwork in information and experience sharing, and used across one or more disciplines. Okay? I just mentioned to you before, some ancient people came up with incredible inventions, but we use some of those inventions and we improve upon them, and we continue to invent based on what they have done. So there is almost a collaboration between different generations. And also, when we work with our contemporary scientists, engineers, professionals, okay, we interact with them, and we continue to invent also by intergenerational interactions, collaboration. Okay. The creative problem-solving mindset. If you observe people that are creative, or maybe you're creative yourself, there are a number of components, elements that are involved with the creative process. And actually, it's possible for people to condition themselves to think in those terms and maximize their creative potential. And those are the following elements. Thinking elementary, about everything that is involved with the problem at a high level, big picture or zoom out, and low level. Low level is zoom in. It's almost at the molecular or atomic level. Associatively, by imaging relevancies, similarities, and analogs of other accessible information, experiences, and observations. It doesn't have to be in the same field. There are many analogs that people can use, inventors can use, in order to conceptualize new creative solutions. Cooperating with others involved with the problem. Very important, teamwork.
I think, if you don't mind me jumping in, Israel, I think number 2 is probably part of the reason that Brian and I originally thought about putting this group together. And that is the idea that there are lots of really good things that we all do in our little worlds that we have not carried over to the others. So if I had to kind of make a point, I think number 2 is one of the reasons this group exists today.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Integratively, remember the definition of creativity, it's recombinant imitation with a new twist. So you get different pieces of knowledge, information sharing, and so on. You have an opportunity to take those pieces, recombine them, and amalgamate them in a certain way, and you get a new concept, a new invention, a new creative solution. And iteratively, through trial and error and learning from experience. Those are the 5 elements. If you read about any inventor, okay, this is what these people have done mentally. And whenever you are involved with a creative problem-solving endeavor, that's what you do, to different degrees, but that's what you do. Most creative people acquire and use this mindset either naturally or through deliberate practice and experience. This is where the aptitude to creativity comes in. Some people have an innate ability to have this mindset. They are born with it. Aptitude, talent for creativity stems solely from innate ability to effectively deploy and rely on this mindset. Any person can hone and maximize his or her creative potential by deliberately practicing and using this mindset. So what that means, you cannot get a person to have a better aptitude to creativity. This is innate. All of us have different levels of creativity, abilities to be creative in different fields. We cannot make them better. We cannot improve our aptitude, but what we can do, okay, by practicing this mindset, we can maximize our creative potential. Does that make sense, Terry? Yes, no?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, that's, I guess, the idea of somebody being a visionary, basically, in a manner of speaking, but also honing that vision into an action of sorts.
Correct. Now, I just want to make a point on the 3rd item. If you read the history of really known inventors, such as Da Vinci, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, they were all mentored by somebody. So they had the innate ability, but they had some coaching, they had some guidance that maximized the expression of their potential creativity, right? Okay.
Well, we see the same thing in the Olympics and sports teams and other things. The coach does not have to be as good as the student, but the student needs the coach to be there.
Very true. Very true. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. So one way of looking at the creative process, it's like solving a puzzle. You come up with different pieces. In this case, those are accessible pieces of information, and you combine it in a certain way to give you the solution, the creative solution that hopefully you will be useful. The 5 basic creativity affecting factors. One is the situational. Those are the situational are the situation where individuals are in and the factors that affect their actions and the outcomes of these actions, which include geography and timing, society, group and peers, general beliefs, culture, social status, and more. Okay. Dispositional, this is really related to the personality, sociability, ability to be influenced, following orders, assertiveness, aptitude and skills, and so on. This is the individuals, the actors. And serendipity. Serendipity is basically chance. Those are different definitions from that I dug out from the dictionary, but all of you know what serendipity is. So the 5 basic factors that determine the types and timing of creativity are, first of all, there's a problem. There's a need, a necessity for some creativity to solve a problem. The situational factor, when, where, in what social setup, what job, and so on. The dispositional, who are the people that are involved? What are their talents? What are their aptitudes? What are their personalities and so on? Knowledge and information, accessible knowledge. This knowledge is derived from learning, experience, skills, communication and interaction with others, observation, access to literature and the internet, and serendipity. Those are the five factors that determine the outcome of creativity. Terry, do you have any questions? No? Greg, do you have any questions?
So is it possible to have too much information?
Ooh, good question.
Yes, of course, it's too much information, but it's really up to the inventor to sieve through the information that he or she needs. And this is the 5 elements that I mentioned to the mindset. Okay, we are flooded constantly with reams of information. But that's where the talent comes in, right?
So being able to filter out some stuff. And then it sounds like probably the most, I don't know, to me, the most important thing you said so far was about this sharing of information, like communication, whether it's collaborating on a team or even sharing over time, you know what I mean? Which is obviously a great way to kill creativity is burn all the books and newspapers, right? Burn them all. Now nobody's creative anymore. But that is interesting to be able to pass that down, so you don't even have to meet face to face, but you could still hand off the information to the next person who's going to carry the torch and create something and then hand it off to the next generation.
Hey, Brian, I want to add to that. I'm looking at this and I'm asking myself, which ones do I have control of and which ones do I not? Or which aspect of each do I have control of or might not? And it's interesting to think about that, because the more that, for example, I can bring onto my team people that have certain dispositions for certain
got it.
aptitudes.
You got it. You got it. Excellent. Excellent. Let's continue. And I think it will what I'm going to present may reinforce of what you're saying right now. But thank you. The success and failure of all creative problem-solving endeavors is determined by the ability to anticipate and minimize serendipity and control the situational dispositional factors. So you as leaders, okay, managers, supervisors, directors, whatever, your job is really to control the situational dispositional factors. And if you do it effectively, your organization is more likely to be more effective in fostering and facilitating individual and collective creativity.
Why do you say minimize serendipity?
Well, whenever anybody performs any experiments or plans, right? What you're trying to do when you plan, whatever you plan, you try to do everything that minimizes uncertainty and maximizes predictability of outcome, right? And the way you maximize the predictability of outcome is by minimizing the chance of random things happening that are out of your control and not anticipated. Now, I have to make one exception. There are some situations where you have to randomize, okay, and allow chance to take its effect, okay? But in general, when you try to do something, plan anything or execute anything, typically you will try to minimize serendipity.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I gave you the example I'm thinking where at least serendipity in my mind is a good thing. So I build software, and one of the things that we try to do a lot is watch people use our software. And if we go ask them really specific questions about, do you like this here? Do you like this here? They'll tell us one or the other. But if we just watch them use the software and ask them to talk out loud, we'll often discover something that we had no idea was even sort of remotely on their mind. We weren't building the software to solve it, but they were either trying to solve the problem with it, or not trying to solve the same problem we thought they were trying to solve, or whatever. And that, as I would use the word, that feels like serendipity, and it can then lead to some interesting ideas.
Correct. And in my attempt to answer you, I qualified it that there are situations where chance is required. Okay, for example, in statistics, where you have random sampling, random sampling is associated directly with chance, right? And the example that you brought up, and there's some other examples, but in general, when there are some undertakings by organizations, typically the serendipity has to be minimized, okay? Right. Now, in the case of dispositional, the dispositional are the people that you choose, the people that you engage on your team. Who do you have participate in the creative, let's say, projects that you are embarking on? Situational is the job, it's the environment and so on.
I would add to that, Israel, I do want as many serendipitous experiences as I can create, okay, but I can set up the others to magnify the possibilities that the serendipity will come.
Okay.
For example, situationally, some of the most creative companies in the world, DuPont's a good example of that, 3M's a real good example of that. They literally give guys a whole day where they do nothing but seek serendipitous solutions, and they can do whatever they want. spark an idea and go after it. And so if I can create a situational
I think
You're muted, David.
I think we're saying the same thing. By setting up, by controlling the situational factor, where you give some of your people the flexibility to do what we call skunk work, right? You are encouraging, creative solutions, and that's one recommendation that I made, and anybody else that is involved in that field. But I agree with you. It's all situational. How do you control the situation, and who are you engaging with? And part of the situation is what kind of freedom do you give people, to experiment and explore? The other thing is, you also have to be very careful to set up your environment so it's not too risk averse. Because if people are scared of being reprimanded or being punished for doing something that was not exactly dictated to them, you're starting creativity. So we agree. Okay. Creativity can be constructive and destructive, and again, it's driven by situational and dispositional factors. I'll give you an example. Nazi Germany, they had brilliant scientists like Heisenberg, who developed the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty, and Planck at the beginning, and on and on and on. And these scientists were forced to try to develop the nuclear bomb. Fortunately, some of them refused to do that. But they were in a situation that was very conducive to develop an evil type of weapon, while the United States embarked on the Manhattan Project and successfully developed that, ended up dropping it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, the nuclear energy, the nuclear technology can be a fantastic thing for humanity. It can provide energy. It can be used for medicine, but at the same time, it can be very destructive. It is situational. Examples of creativity. So if you look at a boomerang, you look at pulleys, you look at woodworking, you look at bird flying, you're looking at the shark, you look at fabric, the wind blowing through the trees, ropes, water bubbles. If I ask, let's say you, Kerry, random, okay? I'm not picking on anybody. What kind of invention would you come up with? Remember the definition. It's creativity is recombinant imitation with a new twist.
Yeah, I guess I'm not that creative.
It's okay. Okay. David, you want to take a stab at that?
Are you talking to this David or the other David?
Oh yeah, I should qualify.
There's 3 Daves basically.
How about Dave
Make
number
it
one?
confusing with the rest of their names.
Okay. That's okay. Let's continue. So here's an example. There are many answers to that. How about the sailing ship? The building blocks associated with the sailing ship are ropes, wheels, blocks, woodworking tools, fabrics, wind power, buoyancy of wood, gravity and design for ballast, steering, hydrodynamics. I'm sorry. Okay. This is fantastic. 7,000 years ago, Chinese have developed sailing ships. Okay. The Egyptians, I don't know, like 5,000 years ago, had sailing ships. The Phoenicians used sailing ships, and they they traveled all over the Mediterranean. Using this principle, what they did, they took similarly unrelated pieces of information, combined them in a certain way, twisted that, and they got the sailing ship. And what they did, it was from one generation knowledge transmitted to the other, and each generation improved upon things. So the sailing ship that I showed you was the Caraval developed by the Spaniards that enabled them to circumvent, Europe, Africa, and later also Magellan, who went all around the world, sailing ship. Recombinant imitation was a new twist. So now you see a sailing ship, wind, boomerang, bird, center of gravity, shark. Ben Davis, what would you come up with?
A faster boat.
Okay. Terry, any idea?
An airplane.
Okay, thanks. How do you relate the airplane to sailing ship?
I'm harnessing aerodynamics. The other things you got on here make me think very similar along those lines.
Okay, good. Interesting answer. So what about kiteboarding? Okay. Same principle. Look at the building elements. Fabrics, wind power, steering, waterways, fluid and hydrodynamics.
This looks like the Wright brothers to me, Israel. That's why I kind of said airplane.
Well, actually, the Wright brothers did exactly the same thing. They have imitated what they have learned other people did over generations. And those included French people that experimented with kites, and Germans, and English, British, and so on. And they have applied some engineering, and they started to experiment with a wind tunnel, and they were able to develop their first craft with a motor, with a propeller. But that's exactly what they did. They recombined things that they knew and provided a new twist that it gave them the airplane. Here are the basic elements and building blocks that led to the development of arch bridges. Okay. Load-resisting eggshells. All of you are probably familiar. If you take an eggshell and you try to squeeze it longitudinally, it's not going to break. Ancient Roman built self-supporting aqueducts, caves with rounded tops, rocks and sand arches formed by wind. Sorry. Tunnels in melting icebergs, flying buttresses, ancient stone or wooden bridges, engineering mechanics. Okay, so there are many, many building blocks to these arch bridges. What makes man creative? Man uses his imagination, intellect, and intuition to respond to his world and anticipate and plan the future. To control his environment, man strives to make it more predictable and thus manageable through its understanding and manipulation. Here are the implications of these abilities. We all have a tendency to form groups, tribes. We discern patterns, trends, and natural laws. Ceaseless learning and exploration, problem solving by improvisation and invention. I'm skipping morality and ethics, timekeeping. Okay, many things that we do are just related to that. What is the underlying drive of all of these human traits? To control the environment by making it manageable all men's thoughts and actions always strive and drive towards minimizing uncertainty and maximizing predictability of outcome. Basic human needs, problem solving is our main tool for maximizing predictability of outcome. And man's most important way to problem solve is through improvisation and creativity. Okay, we all have two components. One is the emotive component and the other one is the cognitive component. When the two combine and overlap, okay, Chris, Helen, what is the outcome of that? Any thought?
I don't have any thoughts.
That's okay. Okay.
This is incredible, but I have no thoughts on that.
Okay. So when the cognitive and emotive part overlap, we get, this is our subjectivity. And subjectivity is, that's where we have opinions, biases, and decisions. All men's actions are enacted through human subjectivity. Forget about objectivity. Objectivity is for bricks, not for humans, but that's another topic. Subjectivity informs opinions, decisions, and actions that fuel creativity. Putting it all together. So this is definition of imagination and aptitude. So you have a certain time, you have a certain situation, and you come up with certain needs, some stimulation for solving a problem. You combine the subjective part of the inventor or inventors with his or her or their imagination, and intuition and aptitude to innovate, and you get the singularity, you have the invention. Again, those are dictated by the situational and dispositional factors. The two basic factors that affect the outcome of pursuing new ideas and inventions is aptitude, that's talent, and attitude. And this is the triangle of creativity. I'll get a little bit more elaborate on that. Aptitude for creativity is the innate ability to use the imagination to intuit and grasp connections between related and seemingly unrelated bits of information and recombine them in a certain way into a new twist. Attitude to practice creativity is willingness to participate and contribute, incessant questioning of conventions, norms, facts, and how to do things. I'm skipping a little bit. Willingness to solicit, listen, and refer to supportive and unsupportive critiques of new concepts. Willingness to cooperate with others. Things to remember with all attitude improving approaches. Remember that angry, hostile, and dismissive behavior always begets anger, hostility, and resentment. We are human. Human nature never forget the flight versus fight. It is instinctual in all of us. And if we get provoked, we can get angry, disappointed, frustrated, offended, and vindictive, which can make us very, very uncooperative and hostile. There's a point to all of that you'll see in a minute. And remember the golden rule. Don't do to others what you don't like to be done to yourself. People like to be treated fairly, feel valued, recognized, and rewarded for their talents, skills, and contributions. So what does it all mean? How do you go about identifying recommendations for attitude and creativity augmented practices? Because after all, you cannot, once you have people working with you or for you, you cannot change their talent to be creative or their aptitude. But you can to a very large degree determine their attitudes towards their job and how willing are they to contribute in the, to help come up with creative solutions. Attitude is everything. You think of the anticipated responses of employees to the golden rule. So here are some general anticipated responses of employees when organizations adhere to the golden rule. Sense of being valued and appreciated, sense of personal and professional purpose, sense of being rewarded professionally and monetarily, trust in the organization that it would do good by its employees, sense of being treated fairly, personally and professionally, and that the organization is putting its money where its mouth is when it comes to people's value. Sense of belonging to something significant and of value, sense of job security with reduced frustration and anger to distract from doing things, sense of contentment and reduced desire or drive to go and look for employment elsewhere, sense of belonging to organization and being vested in its success, sense of loyalty. General trust and sense of kinship among employees and willingness to cooperate towards achievement of the organization goals. Inclination to communicate openly and share information, experiences, and also trial and errors and ideas. Strong inclination to experiment and explore responsibly, skunk work, without fear of being reprimanded or punished. You see how simple it is? It's all common sense. If organizations abide, they adhere to the golden rule. The rest is logic. Then you start to think, okay, if I adhere to the golden rule, what do I do? What does make sense? What is logical to go towards improving the attitude of the employees? Okay, so here are some recommended approaches. Never show or express anger, frustration, impatience, and/or dismissive behavior when dealing with others. It's counterproductive, stunts goodwill, openness, and cooperation, and is wasteful of time and money. When soliciting or being offered unsolicited opinions and ideas, act and treat others as collaborators, not as adversaries, which will often involve goodwill, openness to cooperate and assist, and a sense of being respected and valued. As much as possible, be cordial when you encounter disagreements, criticism, and unbecoming behavior. One of my most favored American generals is Collins Powell, and this is a quote from him. He came up with that statement before Desert Storm, and he's right. Always encourage and solicit open and honest expression of opinions, criticism. Patiently listen to other opinions and ideas. Judge for yourself on their validity and decide whether you want to use some of them, record them, or maybe discard them. It doesn't cost you anything, just listen. Always give credit for opinions, suggestions, ideas, contributions. Okay? People generally like and deeply appreciate being acknowledged and recognized, which makes them professionally and personally, makes them feel professionally and personally validated and relevant, and also they have a sense that they contribute to something, and assisting in pursuing their personal immortality project. Dave Ingram, What do you know what I mean by immortality project?
I assume you mean something that will outlive yourself. Writing a book.
It's exactly
creating-
right. It's exactly right. So all of us have an innate drive or desire to be remembered favorably by others after we die. And in the case of religious people, people hope that God will remember their good deeds as virtuous people and they'll go to heaven. Okay? But it's a very, very, very deeply embedded drive in all of us. Whenever possible, engage the most creative persons available in your problem-solving endeavors in the areas that they are good in. Don't get a stylist, let's say, as an example, somebody that specializes in coming up with styling of cars. Don't get that person involved as creative as he or she is. Don't try to get him involved in creatively designing new transmissions or engines in the car. That's not what he's good at. You know, if you try to use somebody like Albert Einstein, okay, you know who he was, and try to involve him in designing an arch bridge, he's not going to be able to do anything in that area, most likely, or compose something like Mozart, a new symphony. So you have to use creative people in where they have the aptitude for. Tribalize the workforce by giving people a deep sense of purpose, belonging, and vested interest in the success of the organization. Key. I'm going very fast because I'm trying to share with you as much information as I can. I'm sorry. Make the workplace tolerant of mistakes, trial and error, diversity, and referring to human needs and feelings. Acknowledge, recognize, and reward people and teams for tangible and significant contributions. Conduct timely, fair, realistic, and actionable career planning with individual employees. None of us belong, as far as I know, to the daughters of the American Revolution. We all try to make a buck, make a living for ourselves and our families, and career planning is very important. And it goes on, okay? Ignorance and arrogance in practicing creative problems are not bliss. So I'm going back to the arch bridge example. So you see all of those basic elements, building elements for arch bridges. Those were done successfully through the use of bottom-up mode of multidisciplinary teamwork, where participants had the necessary combination of talents, education, knowledge, experience, skills, perspective. And I'll be more specific about it. Unlike with the top-down mode, where only the most cerebral, those are the planners, engineers, and so on, simultaneously conceptualize, plan, and oversee the execution of the creative solution. What I'm talking about, we have these engineers and modelers and managers and so on. They're very, very clever people, very experienced, but in situations where they elect not to engage sufficiently, people with hands-on skills, people that have tried different things for years, called tribal knowledge, and succeeded and failed. Okay, the manual people, those are very important. They are as important as the planners and the designers. And I'll show you an example. The Tacoma Bridge, that was a suspension type of bridge in 7th of November, 1940, it collapsed. Okay? Terrible. What caused the failure? Excessive flexibility of the bridge. The solid plate of the bridge double suspended deck acted like an airfoil. It was going up and down. Insufficient vertical stiffening and trusses to keep winds from causing undulations. Once such a bridge gets into its natural resonance and it starts to get into harmonic up and down, nothing can stop it. And fortunately, the Golden Bridge got into an harmonic one year and it almost collapsed. The aerodynamic forces of the wind were poorly understood and the engineer needed to test them, okay? And they didn't. They didn't do sufficient testing in the wind tunnel. There was no recognition among the engineers that the wind created vertical movement of the bridge. As the wind went across the bridge, the deck started to go up and down. There was a lift situation. The design engineers, civil engineers had a blind spot about the effects of the wind on the bridge. That was the cause of their failure. They were too arrogant to engage people that were more experienced in aerodynamics, in testing in wind tunnels, and coming up with empirical data that would give them a better opportunity to improve this beautiful bridge design into something that was more reliable, because they used the top down instead of the bottom up. So
Right.
during my lectures and so on, I'm almost done, Brian.
Okay.
There are many other recommendations. I try to squeeze a lot in these 45 minutes, but you know, there are areas, recommendation, corporate commitment, management engagement, and on and on and on. Okay. So
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if anybody else has picked up on this, but you just got like a full semester's worth of creativity in less than an hour, and you got it for free. So that's a big plus right there. Lots of good information, and we'll open it up for some question and answer. I'm going to stop the recording here in a second, and I'm going to have to bail out to another meeting I've got here in a minute. But please, feel free to keep the conversation going, and thank you, Israel, because it's some pretty good information, and once you can get your head wrapped around it.
yeah, it takes time to sink in.
Brian, I'll keep it going if you as you go to your meeting. But I'll also kind of throw out something just right out of the gate. I kind of heard another reoccurring theme. And you guys, we've talked about how it seems like every session connects to the next session, connects to the next session. And one of the things I heard from Israel was emotional safety. The ability to create an environment where it's okay to be creative. And that's something I think we're going to talk about in a future session. There's a rumor on the streets that that's coming. But so that's one of them. The other big takeaway for me was the 7 attitudes for creativity. You could almost, Israel, in my mind, use that as a hiring tool to talk about those 7 topics as you're bringing folks into the organization. Because as you said, at the end of the day, once you hired them, you can't really change that.
Correct.
So I thought those were both really interesting. The second one, obviously, being something I can put into practice almost immediately.
The other thing I would like to add to it. So all organizations in the world, for that matter, are creative. They all think that they are creative, they are innovative. The fact is, often, at least their employees, most of their employees don't have a clue what is the dynamics of creativity. And I think it's really, really beneficial to give some basic training to different companies, different organizations, about what creativity is, its dynamics, and because that gives them better understanding when they are expected to be involved with creative endeavors. Why are they being asked to do certain things in certain ways? So training of creativity is very important. That's my recommendation.